So this is another experiment, like we did with Litecoin this morning, but we didn't record it. So this will be a recording of Ethereum, and we basically looked for the date of the Genesis block in Ethereum. We are not 100% sure. I'm not sure if we take Zug as the location or we take some place in the US. So we might have to do more research on Ethereum. But we have the horoscope of Vitalik Buterin that we found on the internet, and since he is past pro toto, the main co-founder, I mean the only one who is still left from all these young geeks. I actually met them in Vienna in 2015, I think, and I did not invest in Ethereum back then because I thought they all have pickles and they're teenagers basically. So it was a big mistake. And yeah, so that's quite interesting now because we will basically, Swamiji will look at the chart live. And
so we're doing a live. I haven't seen what the chart looks like, and I'm just, I don't know anything about Ethereum. Probably I can't even pronounce it, but so we're looking at the chart now. We don't know the accuracy of the time and place.
But yeah, I think it's interesting insofar as there might be some, emotional pops or outpours that we've seen before, and often the first impression is the most precious one, and so we're just doing this as an experiment.
Right. So the first impression is that it's a very stable.
Okay.
It's a very stable cryptocurrency.
It's backed by large banks to a good degree with the Ethereum Foundation, so I can confirm that.
So basically, okay, all right. So let's start. First, it's a very, very structured, set, serious coin. There'll be no erratic movements, and probably we just looked at the chart and we did not see any real erratic movements in terms of its buying and selling.
We looked at the price movement, and you had like the peaks, and then you had slow. I mean, you don't have sudden drops with Ethereum.
Yeah. Compared to Bitcoin, this one would rise, and then it would lower a little bit, but it was lower to a stabilized position, not the peaks, the deep valleys that we look at in other currencies.
At least so far.
So it will do well, but it's a very steady and slow growth, but at the same time very steady. This is the one that who would say that slow and steady wins the race. Now, if I look at, I'm just beginning to analyze the data in terms of its rise and falls. And so the first rise we see was in March of 2017. And it was created in 2015, and it had a gradual rise, nothing major to speak of, until January 2017. Okay, so it had many rises, and the first rise was basically in March of 2017, where it started really climbing. And then the second real major climb was in May 2017. So let me look at...
take your time. If it's, we can cut out some parts if it's too boring.
So basically there was a good opportunity starting from February, so we have to look at that and see. February of 2017, there was a really good period for Ethereum, going on all the way to mid-April, but then it also peaked. It did well in May, and that was also driven by Moon, and then in June. So in July, there's a shift, and this shift really helps. The shift starts in July and it continues till mid-April. So
July 17, mid-April 18.
Yeah. So, and you see that it's actually doing quite well, but then apparently for that period between June 2017 to July 2017, it didn't do so well, but then it started growing, and then it peaked in September. So if we look at this, if I go back to the chart, I'm seeing very good indicators in terms of its progress, but nothing significant yet, nothing major. So it's growing, but nothing, again, it's kind of hanging in there. And then it started going down recently. There was a peak on January 13th of 2018. And there's some really good indicators, but then again, it will do well until June of this year, May. And then June it won't do as well, and we find that to be true also with the other cryptos. So we see a consistency there that in June of this year the cryptos won't do as well. Not only the cryptos, but the financial markets won't do as well. Then basically the ethers won't do as well pretty much until July of 2019.
Mm-hmm. But
in fact, Ether won't do well for the next 2.5 years.
That means
if this is the correct time.
Yeah, until 2020, basically.
Yeah. But then here's the thing, and this is the very interesting thing about this this coin, is that when it comes to mid 2020, that is when the U.S. economy won't be doing well for about 2.5 years. But because this thing either was created in the European market or in Switzerland, from 2020 onwards, it's just going to skyrocket. In fact, it will start incredibly well from 2020 onwards. But before that, it's going to struggle, and it's particularly going to struggle in 2019 and 20. And I'm not quite sure exactly why or how.
So mid 2020 it will.
It will start, yeah, but it will go down in mid of 2019, and then it will rise up in mid 2020. When it comes to mid 2020, the whole dynamic of this currency will change, because it will probably be mainstream, and it will really, really take off after that, but not before.
I mean, it has a lot of competitors at the moment, like Neo and so on, that really put it under pressure somehow, but.
Overall, overall, it has really good indicators in terms of its long-lasting durability. And remember, when I started out, I said this is a coin that sort of wins the race by slow and steady progress. So that was the first impression I had of it, and basically, I see it going there. It's not easy. It's not an easy coin in the sense that it doesn't have a gradual, consistent growth. It has setbacks. It will have challenges, of course. But then overall, from 2020 onwards, it has an incredibly bright future.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But right now, just for this year, what can we say about it? Just so that we can reflect next year. So we are in 2018. We're going to do well. It's going to do relatively well until May of this year.
Like many of the coins, apparently.
Yeah.
And you can basically say that it will still be around in a couple of years.
If it makes it to 2020, then yes. But before 2020, anything can happen.
Okay, that's interesting, yeah. Because it's a very special coin in comparison to others.
Yeah, I mean, it has its drawbacks, interestingly, but it is a leader, and it does have some good indicators to show that it will persist. However, and it is really popular. It has, it does bring in the cash or the flow. People love this coin.
Yeah, and not only people, but institutions as well. And I think that's so rare about Ethereum, that you have big banks involved in it, in this Ethereum Foundation. So it's even politicians, like Vitalik met Putin not so long ago. So he managed to generate a lot of interest, kind of bridge the gap between the wild anti-bankster cryptoneers and the banks themselves. So it's kind of unlike Ripple, which is basically a bankster coin, or Bitcoin that's
it's very interesting you say that, because basically this chart looks like that it has government backing.
Yeah, it does.
So,
but it's not as obvious as with Ripple, for instance.
Oh, okay.
So because it's not, I mean, it's a quite centralized coin when it was created, but so it has the government backing, but it has the appearance of being independent and decentralized. So that's the thing about Ethereum.
So it has a consistent demand, but then it doesn't have a dedicated following. Yeah. So should something happen, people will be ready to bail. But because it has government backing, it will be around.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
A lot of things might happen in terms of technology. So you see what happens, like I said, it may not, it depends on whether it will make it to 2020. If it does survive to that point, then it will be around for sure. And we're talking about another 20 years or so. But if it doesn't make it, there's a potential that there might be some crisis from June this year to June next year.
So please make a note in your calendar set a reminder that when by March or whatever 2020 Ethereum is still around and available, then load the boat with it.
Right.
Kind of.
Yeah. We will hopefully revisit all these predictions next year and see, because the mistakes that are shown or the mistakes that we make, we can learn from those mistakes and then improve it next year. So it'll be very interesting even for me to see how we move with these predictions.
And have you now used Zug, Switzerland as the...
I use Zug. And this is one thing we need to clarify. What's important here is to know when it was first...
when the Genesis block happened and it was mined first.
When it was mined first, and or when it appeared in the market or in the ether. So that's important, and the place where the appearance took place. So these are the two things that are really important, and if we have that information, then it can change basically what my prediction is. Right.
Once we have, we will research it more, and if we have a major update, we will publish that. We have also the apparently right horoscope of Vitalik Buterin, who was one of the co-founders in this. I think the only one that's left. Because there was maybe one other thing. There was a fork in Ethereum, and I'm not sure when it was. I think it was probably 2016. Do you see something about that?
Let me check.
It's basically Ethereum and Ethereum Classic.
So I see that there was some kind of split in the summer of 2016, mid-2016. And there was actually even some problems the entire year prior to that fork. So now this could be reflected in terms of the people or the organizers. Yeah,
they lost a lot of... there's basically a hack or so. And a big mess, but they came out astonishingly well out of this. And that might, maybe, that's my interpretation, or even reflect to the next crisis, because they in a very anti-fragile way made it through the first major crisis.
Right. So basically, it does show that there was a problem in 2016, right from January, in fact, and all through most of the year. And there was some improvement, I think, towards the end of 2016, but it really, there was a significant takeoff starting from January of 2017.
Okay.
But 16 was a very difficult year for them. Yeah. 17 is good, 18, mid-18 to mid-19, not so good. And then 2020, very good onwards.
Vitalik Buterin, you think you want to say something about that?
Well, I have to enter his data, so it will take some time, but that's because these two charts actually have to be compared.
Yeah, so just to bridge that a bit, so So in ancient times, what you did, for instance, to make a prediction for a country, you usually took the birth date of the king or queen, and this was kind of used to make predictions for the whole country, and it worked out pretty well. Not necessarily because the king or then later the president, like we did this with Trump, or Swamiji did this with Trump, not because of the leader being the actual leader and determining everything like in an absolute monarchy. So that's not the reason behind this, but more because there seems to be an alignment of as above so below, so kind of you have the big body of the state and the representative, and for some magical reasons these horoscopes seem to match to a good degree. So if you have the exact birth time of a state like the French Revolution for modern France, or Declaration of Independence for the United States, for instance, you have an exact date, but for some countries you don't really have a perfect date, but you have usually the birth chart of the leader or representative of this country. So that's why we look at Vitalik Buterin now.
The place is Colonna or
Kolol. Colonna.
1A or
It should be somewhere in Russia. I can look it up on Google Maps, maybe.
yeah.
So we're doing this live, of course, which might be more interesting.
Oh, I got it. Oh no, yeah, Columna. Okay, got it.
Yeah. It's near Moscow, apparently. It's quite close to Moscow. It's like not even 100 kilometers east of Moscow.
So he was born in 94. When did he create this? We see it in 2015. So, wow. Yeah, he came to create this. This is all what he was meant to do. Again, in his chart it shows, his chart is more reliable.
Yeah, it seems so, yeah.
So, like I said earlier, if we look at it, if we compare it to Ethereum, is that he won't do as well financially for the next 2.5 years. So let's see what happens when he does. And then he'll start doing well. Personally, he'll start doing well in 2021, not before that. So basically, if we compare his chart with Ethereum, then he's going to hang in there. He's probably a billionaire already anyway.
Yeah, I think he will not be starving.
Yeah, so he'll start doing much better in 2021. But if you look at both Ethereum and his own chart, they're both struggling until now, until 2020. He won't gain from it until 21, but Ethereum will continue to kind of struggle. So both of them will have financial challenges in the next 2.5 years, 3 years.
Yes, that would be another way of rectifying a chart. Now, if you don't have the details on one, you can look at the related, in this case, person.
So if I compare now, for instance, if I look at his chart and I look at the rise of Ethereum, you see that in July, in June, in June when it peaked, this was exactly when, in fact, right to the day, is when it peaked. So that's when he made the most money and probably even cashed out.
Mm-hmm.
So and it did well on June 13th, which is basically when there was a huge peak on Ethereum. And I'm comparing now Ethereum movements to his personal chart. And he did really well all the way and basically, I mean, he seems to be doing really well no matter what. But the real rise was in 2013, where he probably even cashed out some of the coins.
2017.
2017, June 13th. Which is, because we have his chart, it's quite accurate. You could see that he throughout, before June 13, 2017, there's no way he could have really raked it in. There were some successes, but not really anything significant. You could see that he was going through some stress, again, because of the 2016 issues. But then the tide turned in June 2013. And, of course, there's a periods where it doesn't do so well, but then he comes back again. It peaks again. So, all said and done, he has reached a really good, consistent level, and but nothing,
Can you say something maybe about his relations with the powers that be? Because he met Putin recently, and he has all these contracts with the banks that is not so well known, but it is known that basically the Ethereum Foundation. So is he kind of a Trojan horse to the crypto community to some degree? Or?
Well, I don't know, but let's put it: he builds alliances with the establishment.
Yeah. But he is honest about what he's doing. He's not a kind of.
No, I don't think he would sabotage you. I think he is. He's basically a rebel, and it's not someone. He could be a mole you could not trust.
Yeah. So he's not that. He's not a mole.
Yeah, he cannot be a mole. Nobody would trust him.
Yeah. But he could. Of course, there's. I think he's very smart. That's established, and he might be a person who kind of. Tries to undermine the establishment by making contract with him. So keep your enemies close, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So he could do that. He's a rebel.
Okay.
So he's not someone that you can control, but basically he's in bed with everyone, but you cannot know who you cannot trust.
So you would trust him in general?
No, I wouldn't trust him, but
okay.
Because he's in bed with everyone now, you don't know where his alliances are. So.
Okay.
But the question is, in terms of investing in him, as a person, I wouldn't trust him, but in terms of comparing his chart with the Ethereum, because he's the creator of it, we can see some indicative signs or signatures that. Basically, he's doing well for himself, and for people who invested, but because he's in bed with the government, that there is some consistency there, or you could be suspicious and say, well, it's being manipulated. On the other hand, all said and done, when it comes to 2020, 2021, 2020, it's still started. 2021, let's put it that way. We'll really see the effect of the rise of Ethereum in 2021, more so than in 2020, but you will see the uptake in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, I think, a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So I'm also quite excited about this, so we'll see whether it all plays out, and we can touch base again a year from now and see where we are.
Exactly, and Ethereum is really the backbone of a lot of tokens, of course. So, thanks a lot.
Yeah. Well,